Welcome back and willkommen zurück to the MEU Berlin podcast, Union Voices. I'm your host, Tabea, and I'm thrilled to bring you yet another thought-provoking episode. Today, we're diving into an important topic, the EU's support for Belarusian civil society. Joining me for this conversation are Maria Pia and Anastasia Papapetru, who are both part members of the Young European Ambassador Network, the YEA. Together, we will explore the EU's initiatives to support Belarusian civil society, as well as the challenges they face, and also the critical role young people play. And if you're interested in the EU, in the EU's neighbors, in youth activism, and the future of civil engagement in Belarus, this episode is for you. So let's start. First, I would ask you to briefly introduce yourselves, who you are, what you've done so far, and also what your role in the YEA is and what the YEA does. So maybe Maria Pia, would you start, please?
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us and for giving us space to talk about such an important topic. My name is Maria Pia, I come from Italy, and I've been involved in the Young European Ambassadors Network for now around 5 years. So I started as a Young European Ambassador, and now since 2021, I am coordinating the YAs from the EU, the UK, and Belarus. And now, I will let my colleague say something about her and her experience.
Hello, everyone, from me too. My name is Anastasia Papapetru. I'm from Greece, and I am a Young European Ambassador for the past 2.5 years.
Great, thanks for that. So, what are your roles in the YEA? What do you do?
So I answer to a lot of emails, but apart from that, I would say my main role is to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the network, that they know what they want to do, that they feel supported, and that they have enough space to organize their own initiative. I would say just a few words on the network in general to give some context. The Young European Ambassadors is a network which is managed by DG NEAR, part of the European Commission, and is part of EU Neighbours East, a regional communication program. So our main role is to communicate about the European Union in our region of interest, which in our case is the Eastern Partnership. The Eastern Partnership is a partnership in between the EU and 6 Eastern partner countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. So in this episode, we'll explore a bit more of the relationship with Belarus, which is the most complicated. But yeah, we also deal with young people from all of the other countries.
Okay, thank you for that. So maybe both of you, how did you get involved with the YEA in the first place? Would you want to start, Anastasia?
In the first place, I was really interested about international relations, cooperation, and when I first saw that they had opened the positions for the Young European Ambassadors, I applied, I understood better the network, and then from so on, I participated in international and national events, met people from all over the world. As a Young European Ambassador, you get to do a lot of different things. You get to participate in campaigns, in international events, organize events of your own, write articles. There are many different subjects that you can dive more into.
Thank you. That sounds very interesting. How about you, Maria Pia?
It was very random, I have to say. This is a confession I do, even though I'm doing it quite publicly now. Initially, I joined because I was in one of my areas in which I was applying to everything. And then when I started participating in the network and I really understood what it was about, then I simply fell in love with the concept of connecting people from different parts of Europe, and especially many countries that we don't normally meet people from. Before participating in the network, I never met anyone from Armenia or Azerbaijan. While it's more common maybe to meet someone from Ukraine. So I just fell in love with the whole concept and the project, and I would say that now I cannot live without.
That's very beautiful to hear too. So we said our topic today is Belarus and the support of the European Union. So let's start with that. First, maybe could you give us an overview of the strategy of the European Union for supporting Belarusian civil society?
Yes. So first of all, a bit of context in the past years. So after the fraudulent elections of 2020, the relationship between the EU and the Republic of Belarus basically fell apart. So while a few years back, we had activities, for example, inside Belarus, and it was easier, and there were more connections in between Belarusian youth and youth from the European Union. From 2020, this is not possible anymore. So there's a lot less or basically none support to the people in the country, but there's still support to Belarusian people outside the country or let's say online and in different ways. So since 2020, the EU started with a new tool, which is the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. And through that, the EU has given as financial assistance around 140 million euros to Belarusian people, who became 170 in December when there was a new kind of financing. This kind of money, they normally support civil society in the sense that they support people that do free media, youth work, activities that have an impact on democracy. Also, you might have seen in the news that there is a parallel government of Belarus. So there's let's say, the government in the country, which in this moment is not recognized by many states because of how elections are made. And in this moment in time, we're recording this episode in January 2025. There's also many news because there have been elections in Belarus. So I encourage everyone to have a look. So since this is what's lacking, the possibility for civil society to thrive and to organizations, most of the funding is for that and for education, which for the EU is always a priority. So I won't be here boring you with all the percentages and different projects, but I would suggest if anyone is a particular interested in seeing a bit more how this money is allocated, to go on the website of the EEAS or DGNIR, in which they can find some info sheets with more information.
Thank you for that. That is a lot of information you already gave, and I think very important to understand when diving into the topic. To go a little further, or maybe give more context, what would be the main challenges that Belarusian civil society is facing? You already gave some examples and some insight into that, but maybe let's dive deeper into that topic and also talk about what is being done to address those challenges.
Well, first and foremost, human rights are increasingly at the forefront of conversations all across the European continent, particularly since the start of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. However, the Belarusian civil society, ever since 2001, has faced major violations in human rights. During and after the mass and overwhelming peaceful protests against the widely alleged electoral fraud in 2020, Viasna, and the most prominent non-governmental organization in Belarus, was instrumental in documenting and reporting widespread human rights violations, including arbitrary arrests, detentions, torture, and other ill treatment and unfair trials. As of the end of November 2024, again according to Viasna, there were 1,296 political prisoners in Belarus, including 172 women. Following the electoral manipulation and protests in 2020, the leaders of the opposition and their supporters faced violation and imprisonment. An example of a political prisoner is Maria Kolesnikova, a prominent Belarusian opposition figure who was one of the main supporters of Tikhanovskaya. Other human rights violations include disproportionate violence against opposition representatives, journalists, and lawyers. In March 2020, according to Viasna, 6 lawyers were arrested after having represented well-known political prisoners. Amongst them was Ivan Chisvik, the last lawyer to represent Viktor Babarika. Another example of illegal imprisonment is that of Roman Protasevich, a journalist who on the 3rd of May 2023 was arrested after the Ryanair plane he was on was forced to land in Minsk. We have also the theme of violation of the right to peaceful assembly and expression. In total, since May 2020, at least 4,066 people have been convicted of participating in post-election protests under the Article 3042 and the Article 2093 of the Criminal Code. Health violations in prisons due to excessive use of torture and overcrowding, as well as lack of fair trial and independent judicial system. Particularly, the investigative committee announced the initiation of a criminal case against participants in peaceful assemblies dedicated to Freedom Day, March 2025, which took place in many countries where Belarusians were forced to immigrate due to the situation as of right now in Belarus. Also, we have the use of tax fraud as a way of withholding someone due to political accusations. An example of this is Viktor Babarika, an opposition leader who attempted to run for president in 2020. After pledging to bring democracy and respect in the separation of powers and establish presidential term limits, he was proved to be quite popular in the polls. However, before the election, he was arrested and sentenced to 14 years in prison. It was reported that on April 27, 2023, he was hospitalized after suffering severe beatings in the penal colony called Novopolotsk. His lawyers and family have not heard from him ever since. We have international and Belarusian rights groups, as well as the UN human rights experts on Belarus, who noted a continuously deteriorating human rights situation in 2024. Characteristically, in March, the UN Human Rights Office reported it had found reasonable grounds to believe that the crime against humanity of persecution may have been committed. As a way of expressing the support, the EU has timely expressed their concern in terms of the human rights situation, along with posing severe sanctions against the regime, while also expressing its support to the Belarusian people quest for free, democratic, sovereign, and independent Belarus. As we said before, so far the European Union has imposed sanctions against both the regime and the president, starting in October 2020, when the Council imposed restrictive measures against 40 individuals identified as responsible for repression and intimidation against peaceful demonstrations, opposition leaders, and journalists in the wake of 2020 presidential election in Belarus. Following that, in June 2021, the Council decided to impose new restrictive measures against 78 Belarusian individuals and entities that were connected to the regime. This decision was made because of the escalation of serious human rights violations in Belarus and the violent repressions of civil society, democratic opposition, and journalists. In February 2024, the Council decided to prolong the restrictive measures linked to internal repression in Belarus and the regime's support for Russia's wars against Ukraine for another year until the 28th of February of 2025. EU restrictive measures on Belarus now apply on a total of 166 persons and 15 entities connected, linked to the government. As of 2020, the European Union has mobilized in order to support the Belarusian people and the civil society 170 million in total for civil society, human rights defenders, independent media, educational and cultural institutions, and small and medium-sized businesses in exile. This assistance is focused on supporting mainly non-governmental organizations away from public authorities and state-owned enterprises. On December 2024, the European Commission adopted a new assistance program with 30 million to further support the people of Belarus. The newly adopted assistance program is called EU for People of Belarus, Strengthen Human Rights and Education, which aims to preserve an independent civic space and support unbiased quality education opportunities for Belarusians. In addition, the program will support students as well as professionals with specific focus on women in accessing modern and equality education, training, and learning opportunities via scholarship programs, online courses, and support to the independent educational institutions. This program has been developed following regular consultations with Belarusian democratic forces and civil society to identify the needs of the Belarusian people. It adds to the 140 million mobilized by the EU since 2020 in 6 key areas, which is civil society, human rights, independent media, education, and culture in exile. This program is a part of a way bigger one, which is for 53 million support package announced in August 2020 by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, which also includes 3.7 million EU emergency support immediately mobilized for victims of oppression and independent media. That is what is happening right now, as of right now, in a few words, in the Republic of Belarus. Which is why right now the EU is trying to support the EU as well as the young European ambassadors. We are trying to support civil society and individuals, mainly who are outside of the country.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. That was very informative. And I think it's very important to also note that we have now seen or heard from you that the situation is very bad, that opposition politicians, that political leaders, journalists, members of civil society, just people like you and me, are facing dangers and have been imprisoned and worse. And to see that this has had an effect, that there have been sanctions, and also that apart from those sanctions, which we could argue, while they, of course, are bad for political situation, for the leaders of a country, might further make the situation for civil society hard, to see that there have been funds to help civil society, to help non-governmental organizations and stuff. So that was very informative. And you already started speaking about the role of the YEA network in that. So let's dive into that too a little bit. So how does the YEA network contribute to supporting Belarusian civil society?
Well, since we can only focus on civil society, we work through we have a very big range of activities because we are the Young European Ambassadors, a non-political voluntary network that connects young people from the European Union and its sister partner countries, including Belarus. In Belarus, the young European ambassadors support civil society by engaging in various activities such as youth engagement, for example. We have young European ambassadors who encourage local youth participation by organizing workshops, school visits, public discussions. These activities aim to inform both European youth and Belarusians about the EU opportunities and foster active citizenship. We have leadership and networking. The initiative offers young Belarusians opportunities to develop their leadership skills and expand their network. By participating in international forums and events, such as, for example, the European Forum of Young Leaders, young European ambassadors for Belarus can connect with peers and civil society activists from all over Europe. We also have a very big campaign which focuses on combating disinformation through campaigns like Young European Ambassadors versus Disinfo. We collaborate with experts to address disinformation. These efforts include educating peers on media literacy and promoting accurate information and thereby strengthening the resilience of Belarusian civil society against disinformation. And that also works for us as young Europeans because we are able to gain the information that we need in order to take a stand against what is happening right now. We have, of course, social media and public diplomacy, social media campaigns. We organize and public diplomacy activities to raise awareness about the EU beliefs and what is happening right now in Belarus, and promote the European values within the Belarusian communities and help them take a stand to actively promote their rights. Of course, we have human rights advocacy. Belarusian young European ambassadors participate in international competition and initiatives focusing on human rights, therefore highlighting and addressing civil society issues and their importance. By participating in these initiatives, we as young European ambassadors contribute to the empowerment and development of Belarusian civil society, fostering a more informed and engaged youth community internationally and especially in the European level.
Thank you also for that. Our next part will be youth engagement. But before that, I have a question that is a little off topic, maybe, because before this interview, you have told me that there is a difference between Belarusian civil society and civil society in Belarus, which to me now is clear, but I think we should maybe explain that again briefly for the listeners, because that might not be immediately clear for everyone. So could any of you maybe explain that? Yes, Maria Pia?
Yeah, no, I can say a few words. So we made this difference to make it clear because especially when it comes to cooperation with Belarusians and EU funds, we cannot operate with civil society in Belarus. So a part of the propaganda means that in this moment, there are NGOs inside Belarus. There is also youth councils based in Belarus. The difference is that these institutions are managed by the regime, so they're not independent organizations. So, for example, it's also possible to go to the COP, to the Conference of the Parties, and find some young people from Belarus. And this can give the impression to someone that is not familiar with the country that young people can participate in civic life, that they can be part of democracy. But it's not the case because there's no democracy. So that's why we work with the Belarusian civil society in this moment based outside of Belarus and not with civil society in Belarus, which is at the moment, unfortunately, not free to do. And so a civil society that is not free, it's not a civil society we can work with to build democracy.
Thank you. I think that is very important to also note briefly. So then let's get back on track. So the next topic would be youth engagement and youth involvement in policymaking. So how does the European Union engage young people in policymaking processes, especially when it comes to Eastern neighbors like Belarus?
So in the past years, there have been different initiatives. When the Eastern Partnership started, so a few years back and before the elections in 2020, there were also yearly events which were connected to policymaking that included people from all of the Eastern Partnership countries. Now, since the situation changed in 2020, there's not the same kind of relationship, and I would say it's not that easy. It's a bit more complicated. So the EU has different actions. There are some actions which are for all young people from states which are not part of the EU, so there are not member states, and there are some specific actions done with civil society, with Belarusian civil society. In the second case, we know less about it because it's a more direct relationship. So, for example, also for a security reason, it's not possible to publish the names of everyone that is involved because many people sometimes come back to Belarus to see their families or they have families in Belarus. So, publishing names, pictures of people that are involved in the Belarusian civil society might really harm everyone they know that is still in the country and cannot or doesn't want to go anywhere else. So there is this kind of direct relationship that the institutions have built in time with civil society organizations, with the youth sector, and so on. And there are some notable organizations like RADA, which is the youth forum that at a certain point has been declared illegal in Belarus, but keeps existing on the outside. Other two instruments that the European Union uses, and it's mainly the European Commission that manages it, are the Youth Action Plan and the Youth Sounding Board. So the Youth Action Plan was also bordered by a consultative process in which we have taken part, and it's a plan to better involve young people in states outside of the European Union. It's mainly implemented through the EU delegations to countries. So it suggests and requires to EU delegation in different countries to talk to young people, to understand what their needs are, to build partnerships which are more significant for them. This program really depends on the country, so it's difficult in this moment to talk about each and every of them. But each EU delegation also has a strategy for youth engagement. So they organize different kind of events, also based on the needs of young people. So young people in Azerbaijan will have different needs from young people in Nigeria or in Brazil or in Kazakhstan. So this is very targeted based on the country. Then we have the Youth Sounding Board, which is a group of young people that is selected every 2 years and acts as a sounding board because policy ideas are tested with them. So it's a sort of testing, of a youth testing that the European Union does with some ideas or policies. These young people are selected, and virtually everyone can apply. So for people interested in policy making, I would say this is a great opportunity to get closer to the institutions. But apart from the European Union, I think we need to mention in this case the Council of Europe, because the Council of Europe, since Belarus is part of a cultural convention, so it's not part of Council of Europe, but just one convention which is done by the Council of Europe. With this tool, they can include young people from Belarus in participating to different events connected to democracy, and also in their advisory board. So there are organizations from Belarus in the advisory board of the Council of Europe. And this is very interesting and it's very important because it's a great way to support their work and give visibility to their work. So that's why sometimes it's more common to find young people from Belarus in the Council of Europe rather than in the EU, because depending on the relationship in between the country, one institution manages to be more inclusive than the other. So if there's any young Belarusian also listening to us, I would say always keep an eye on the opportunities published by the Council of Europe Youth Department. They're great, and the food is great, which said by an Italian, it's mostly true. But also it's a great way to meet other people that can help you do your work in civil society.
Okay, thank you so much. So that was an overview basically of where young people can get involved and can go to do something, do anything. What exactly is it that young people especially can do that, well, is very specific to young people that maybe older people can't do in the same way?
Well, I would say when we talk about young people in the EU, there's a responsibility to get informed to change things for the future, which is something that they can and they should do more than adults, which have already lived a big part of their life. Of course, not all of their life; they still have a lot to live. But young people have more interest in building their future. But the first step, especially in the case of Belarus, is to get informed. And then to take action, because many people are not aware of what's happening in Belarus. They don't know the specifics, or they see it as just another state at the east. In reality, the situation is very different, and that's also why we need to support more people, NGOs, and also artists coming from Belarus. I suggest everyone to have a look at Belarusian cats, which are rebel cats designed with the flag of the opposition, the flag of Free Belarus. So it's our responsibility to do that. And what we can do, putting myself in the young people now, we can communicate better than our parents, let's say, or than older people. We can communicate better. We know how to use the social media. We know how to use networks, but we also can communicate better in between people and reach more people. So it's important that if we believe in a cause and if we want to fight for something, that we communicate it, that we share it with others, because others might be inspired by our action. So it's important not just to keep the things to ourselves, but to share our knowledge and our inspiration.
Okay, thank you. So when we're talking about what we can do, one part that you've said is to also raise awareness, to advocate for something. And if you're talking about that, what are some initiatives to raise awareness or to advocate that the YEA has undertaken regarding Belarus, and how effective have those been?
We have done an array of activities, let's just say, and I have also participated in very big platforms. One notable example is the recognition of a young European ambassador member from Belarus in the Council of Europe's Human Rights Camera Action Competition in 2023. This achievement underscores the young European ambassador's commitment to promoting human rights and highlighting civil society issues. Through participation in international forums and events, our young European ambassadors from Belarus have the opportunity to connect with peers and civil society across all over Europe. An example of this is that the participation of course, as I said before, the European Forum of Young Leaders. And this kind of engagement helps young European ambassadors, not just from Belarus, but also from Europe, to develop leadership, expand the network, encourage cross-border and solidarity, and amplify the Belarusian civil society issues among young Europeans. What we as young European ambassadors can also do, we organize events, workshops, campaigns to raise awareness about the current situation in Belarus. These activities aim to inform and engage Belarusians and European youth alike, fostering active citizenship and community involvement. Through these efforts, we have contributed to the empowerment and development not just of the Belarusian civil society, but also of our fostering a feeling of compassion and actually comprehending what is happening right now in Belarus and helping to take a stand, inform young people, create campaigns, and engage the international youth community towards what we believe is right. These initiatives, at least in my opinion, have been quite successful so far, if I should say so myself, because they have engaged hundreds of young participants from all over Europe, fostering a greater understanding of democratic values and civic engagement. As a result, we have supported strengthening youth networks and civic awareness amongst young people across all over the region. which is why we continue to speak about what is actually happening. We write blog posts, we have our social media campaigns, we have events online and in person in countries where we have Belarusian people in order to help them inform all the other Europeans about what is happening right now. For example, inform about the results of the current elections and what actually happened, what the EU believes about the elections that happened in January 2025, and what we should do to further not just help the Belarusian people outside the country, but also ultimately encourage the people that are in the field, that are inside the country, to take a stand about their rights, because Belarusian people rights are also our rights. We are, as we all know, one continent, and what happened in one people's lives also affects us.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's, as you said, very important to ultimately reach freedom for everyone, because, as we all know, we are not free until everyone is free, and that is the goal, right? So, how do you plan to further reach that goal, to expand your activities? What are your plans for that?
So first of all, we would like more young people from Belarus living in the EU to join us. So I hope that more people will be interested in time. We know it's not easy. We know it's dangerous. So we know there's a limited number of people that would like and can do that. But we do hope that everyone that can do that will decide to get involved. And then we hope in what often happens, then there will be word of mouth and more people will start thinking of talking about it and getting connected to the cause and will want to get involved and to do more. We think in time we already raise awareness among people from the EU, but of course we would need to do much more. That's why I think it would also be great, and that's a wish for the future, to connect with Belarusian civil society organizations based in our countries, because I think our main role should be to amplify the voices of Belarusians rather than speaking for them. Of course, this is not always possible. As today, too, we have preferred talking about it ourselves rather than putting the name of a colleague which might not be comfortable with it, especially when it comes to high visibility. It's good that there's a peer from the EU that can talk about the cause, but it's important to amplify the voices of the resistance, of the people that had to leave their country and had to do all the work, and that did all the work to first make the world aware that the government in Belarus is not legitimate, is not democratic, and is not elected by the people. So these are our wishes for the future. If I can say, they're also part of our 2025 plan. So if there's anyone from Belarus or passionate about Belarus listening to us, please join us, reach out to us, and let's see what we can do together.
Thank you. Yeah. So, is there anything you two might want to still add to all of that has been said? Is there anything you would still want to tell our listeners today?
There is a very interesting program that I learned when I interviewed a Belarusian person for the article that I wrote, which is the Godfather program by Viasna, the humanitarian organization in Belarus, which actually helps people that are in prisons get in touch with people that are outside. You write letters to these people, make them know that you're thinking of them, that you're demanding their release, and then possibly, we don't know if they get them, but it's always something that is helping and can provide more help for the people that are in there.
Okay, that is a great initiative to check out. And well, to come to a close, let's briefly recap what we talked about today, which at first we talked about what the YEA is, what it does. And then we talked about the situation in Belarus today, which is bad. We talked about the human rights violations that have been recorded and how hard it is for everyday people to do something about that situation. And which is also, as you have noted, why you two are here today and not a Belarusian, because it might be very dangerous for them to participate in something like that, to have their name publicly available. And then we talked about what young people especially can do, which is to raise awareness, to make the future that they have to live in better. We talked about what the European Union has been doing about the situation in Belarus, which is sanctions and support for Belarusian civil society. And we have heard that you are looking for people to participate in the YEA. So if there's anyone out there, this might be your chance. Well, I would love to thank you two again for your time and for all the information you provided us with today. It was very informative, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure. And yeah, I hope first we will collaborate again in the future, and then everyone that is listening to us and that is willing to do so.
Of course. Yeah, hopefully that will happen.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you so much. Then have a great day.